What's going on, everybody? Nick Whalen, Jeff Erickson here with you from RotoWire. It's time to turn the page to week 11 of the fantasy football season. We're talking sneaky ads for every spot on the waiver wire. We'll give you quarterbacks, we'll give you running backs, we'll give you receivers, and we will give you tight ends. Just a reminder, it's another week with 4 teams on bye. So no Giants, no Arizona Cardinals, no Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and no Carolina Panthers. A couple of teams with reasonable fantasy options and a couple of teams that maybe we're not so concerned about there. But nevertheless, Jeff, we'll be without some key players this week. Let's start at the quarterback position as we always do. Not a whole lot out there right now, but we're thinking about people in 2 quarterback leagues and super flex. If you are in need of a quarterback this week, Jeff, where are you looking first?
Well, we'll start off single league. Say you have Kyler Murray, you're looking for an ad. I think one idea is Drake Maye. I like the development I'm seeing out of him.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you get some rushing yards too. I think that's one of the things that it just gives you a little bit of a base in case like you get in a stinker like you did like against the Bears this past week, where it's just not an up and down sort of game. At least you get some yardage there that kind of gives you a little bit of a floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and despite New England winning that game, you could argue that was a negative game script as far as the Pats passing game goes. And That's not something that I think we'll see a ton going forward. Don't foresee many 2-score leads for the New England Patriots. I'll give you a couple names quickly. I mean, not necessarily a sneaky ad. Russell Wilson is 40% rostered right now in ESPN leagues, but decent chance that he's out there. Gets the Baltimore Ravens this week. We know about that pass defense. Then the Browns, the Bengals, and the Browns again. Still dealing with a small sample when it comes to Russ, but he's given you 25, 14, and 19 fantasy points since taking over, averaging about 19 fantasy points per game. Not too bad. So he's somebody to consider. I mean, Joe Flacco, still widely available. I know it's been kind of a bust since he officially retook over the job these last 2 weeks, but he gets the Jets, the Lions, and the Patriots over the next 3 weeks. He is very low owned in ESPN. Jameis Winston, still out there in a bunch of leagues. I would pick up Jameis if I was making a spec ad on a quarterback. He's got a reasonable schedule coming up as well with the Saints as their next opponent, then the Steelers, Broncos, Steelers, and Chiefs. So it does stiffen up a little bit after that. And then one last one, if you're in a desperation zone. But I will say, I've been impressed with the development of this player, Jeff. Bo Nix gets a matchup against the Atlanta Falcons this week.
Oh, yeah. I like Bo Nix better than almost all those except for Russell Wilson, I think. Russell Wilson, I like the best of those. Desperation play in a super flex league. Think about Tyrod Taylor. Jets are donezo, and Aaron Rodgers gets banged up every week. Jim Coventry is mentioning this in his early waiver P column. Rodgers probably will play this week. He'll probably be fine, but there might be an opportunity there where you're looking down the line. We got week 12, week 14 are super bye weeks. 6 teams on bye for each of those weeks. May think about looking ahead there. Trevor Lawrence may not play again going forward. So Mac Jones, if you're a thrill seeker, could be also available to you there. But and just keep an eye out because other changes are going to happen.
Yeah, Mac Jones, who piloted that Jaguars offense, that high flying aerial attack to 143 total yards this past week against Minnesota, did not make the cut for me. Let's go to running back. A few more options at this position. Still, I wouldn't say fruitful, but we do have one big one and somewhat of a sudden change, an unsuspecting change in Denver this past week, Jeff.
Yes, that's right. Audric Estime got 14 out of the 17 carries for the Broncos. Javonte Williams only got 1. And it's not like I'm pounding the table for Javonte Williams anymore. I may have at one point in time in my life and career. I'm done with that. But Estime appears to be the guy, and he'll get a better matchup this week against Atlanta. So I like it. And then I think they're on bye the following week. So you kind of have to pace yourself. But if you're looking for someone for this upcoming week, you're missing out on Chuba Hubbard. You might want to go ahead and try to take a chance on Estime.
Yeah, I think he's going to be the most competitive waiver wire out of the week at the position. Rare that you just have a possible starter going forward appearing in week 10. But this did really come out of nowhere. Like you said, Javonte Williams carried only 1 time, played only 16 snaps. Estime saw 26 snaps, carried 14 times, was not targeted. However, there's not a ton of pass catching upside with Estime, so that is the rub. But Sean Payton called him, quote, a handful after the game, which I think is a compliment in this context. So yeah. We'll see if we can trust it going forward, but you got to take a look at Audric Estime. Tyjae Spears, still relatively high owned. He missed some time, but he is available in over 50% of leagues right now. Saw 10 touches this past week. Tony Pollard's still the starter in Tennessee, but they might want to get more looks at Tyjae Spears down the stretch in what's looking like a lost season. Heavily depends on game script. Are they playing from behind? They were last week, but the Chargers are just a terrible matchup for running backs. Does get better going forward. They do have Minnesota and Houston coming up, and the Commanders and the Jaguars. So a couple juicy matchups in there. What other running backs are you looking at this week, Jeff?
A couple more for you here. First of all, I saw him available in a couple leagues last week, but he probably won't be available in too many leagues. But Jaylen Warren, if he does happen to be available, Najee Harris banged up his ankle in this the win over the Commanders. They're done with their buys too, so you need they're going to maybe need to find another way to rest Harris at some point in time. So Warren's a pretty capable back. Fumble at the 1 yard line this past week notwithstanding. Just be aware Cordero Patterson's there to kind of just vulture from everybody. Cam Akers in Minnesota, if the Aaron Jones chest injury is an issue, because it's now Akers over Ty Chandler.
Yep, I had him on my list as well. I'm monitoring Aaron Jones very closely. Left the game on a cart against Jacksonville. Ended up coming back late in the fourth quarter, but dealing with a rib injury. Obviously somebody who's liable to be banged up at any time. So if Aaron Jones were to miss any time, Cam Akers would be the guy. Carried 13 times to just 4 for Ty Chandler in that Jags game. Gus Edwards, he's back for the Chargers. He's the RB2. He's available in about 80% of leagues. Not exciting, and also not a great schedule coming up for the Chargers. Bengals, Ravens, Falcons, Chiefs are their next 4 opponents. But still, just one of those kind of obvious handcuffs if J.K. Dobbins were to go down. Kamani Vidal was inactive this past week. So still a gap there between Dobbins and Edwards and the rest of those backs. That's all I got at running back, though, Jeff. Is there anybody else on your list?
Nope. I think we can move on.
All right, let's move to wide receiver. Before we do that, however, please make sure you give this video a like if you're enjoying it, and also make sure you're subscribed to the RotoWire YouTube channel. That way you won't miss any of our content through the rest of the season. Just click that subscribe button. Let's go to wide receivers, Jeff. I'll let you lead us off here.
I think Kayshon Boutte is the lead wide receiver for the Pats. Again, if you're going to go Drake Maye, then you're probably looking at Boutte. Again, it's not like I'm thrilled with the volume you're getting in New England, but it is a game script issue. And I think in weeks where that isn't going to be the case there, I think he's the lead guy to get. Keep in mind, they're trying to go young at the position, so that befits him.
Yeah, he's on my list as well. I mean, they essentially scratched Kendrick Bourne this week and just said, hey, man, we want to turn it over to the young guys. And we saw Kayshon Boutte wildly outsnap every other Pats receiver. Played almost every snap in the game, 62 of possible 64. No other Patriots receiver even got to 30 snaps between Pop Douglas, Jalen Polk, KJ Osborne. So I think Boutte, at least for now, this is always liable to change week to week. But if I had to add a Pats receiver, it would certainly be him. 6 targets, 4 for 47 this past week. And again, this was not a positive pass script. Drake Maye only threw the ball 25 times. This is a rare situation for New England. He's going to be throwing it 30 to 35 plus times going forward. That's essentially been the standard in every other game that he's started and finished. And you look at the upcoming schedule, Rams, Dolphins, Colts, Cardinals are the next 4 games. Good chance they're playing from behind in a decent chunk of those. Ricky Pearsall, we got to mention him, 25% rostered in ESPN leagues, found the end zone on Sunday, 4 catches for 73 yards on 6 targets. Now, he's still behind Debo. He's still behind Jawan Jennings, who was targeted 11 times. Then, of course, you got Kittle and you got Christian McCaffrey back in the mix. So heavy competition for targets, but still think there's some upside here. I wouldn't be targeting the number 3 receiver in most offenses, but I just want pieces of the Niners team.
Yeah, agreed. Pearsall looked really good on the touchdown. I actually had him in a league, active in a league this past week. Injuries, bye weeks will do that you have to take some desperate plays there, and that was one that paid off at least. Honorable mention to Mike Williams, who had only that 1 target, which was a touchdown against the Commanders. Pretty good schedule coming forward. We get the Ravens and the Bengals coming up the next couple of weeks as well, so that's something to keep in mind too. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, got to go MVS a little bit there, although what a first half. 3 catches for 109 yards. No more targets after that. Weird game against Atlanta, but still, he contributed. It was him. That was the receiver. And nobody's coming back for New Orleans. I think that's the thing to keep kind of focused on. Shahid's done. Olave, I'd be surprised if he comes back this year. He's on IR with that concussion. Maybe he comes back if the Saints put together some sort of thing, but I don't think it's going to happen. And then I throw in Elijah Moore as well for the Cleveland Browns. I think, keep in mind, he's coming off the bye. I think Jameis kind of unlocks these guys a little bit. Yeah,
I like the MVS call. I mean, there's a reasonable chance that he could put up 0 fantasy points for the next 2 games, but I think there is a role for him with all the injuries and, kind of the already established Rashid Shaheed role in New Orleans. Like, he fits that to a T. He can kind of step into that. He's not the player that Shaheed is, but he has a similar type of physical profile. And he even did the unthinkable and caught a short touchdown in that win over Atlanta. I'll run through a couple more quickly. Alec Pierce, he is a Joe Flacco merchant, no question about it, but we have to pay attention. He went 4 for 81 with the garbage time of all garbage time touchdowns last week against Buffalo. He is extremely volatilely big play dependent, doesn't see a ton of targets. His 7 targets this past week matched his season high, but he does tend to hit at least 1 or 2 long plays every single week. The Colts need that in this offense. Again, you're looking at a relatively low floor week to week, but a pretty high ceiling. As far as guys who are under 20% rostered, not many of those players have given you 22, 17, 22, and 18 fantasy points already in 4 games this season. I would look at Rashod Bateman too. Not exciting at this point, but Deontay Johnson has played 2 games for the Ravens and he's played 21 total snaps. Just really has not had an impact quite yet. Bateman was still targeted 8 times in that Cincinnati game on Thursday, caught 6 for 54 and a touchdown. It was a uniquely high-scoring game. We saw Baltimore not really run the ball very effectively, so keep that in mind. But I still do think he's a reasonable bench option in deeper leagues. John Metchie, he should be mentioned after his big game on Sunday night. Still a little bit skeptical. I mean, if Nico Collins is back this coming week, then that probably renders him on the fantasy fringes. He was still 3rd among receivers on Sunday night behind Hutchinson and Dell in terms of snaps and routes. And then the last guy I have, Jalen Coker in Carolina. Panthers are on bye this week, so keep that in mind, but saw a significant increase in his snap share this past week against the Giants. Was targeted 8 times, caught 3 for 41 yards. Somebody I think Carolina wants to get an extended look at down the stretch. And, Bryce Young started to look a little bit more competent at least. So in a deeper league, I would take a look at Jalen Coker. Let's finish out, Jeff, with the tight end position. Anything you got your eye on here?
I only got one. Dawson Knox going up against the Chiefs. If Dalton Kincaid's knee injury keeps him out this week, Knox is in a pretty good position. Tight ends typically do well against the Chiefs too.
Yep, no question about that. He is the guy if Kincaid is out, and I think there's a good chance he is. He said he wanted to return last week and just couldn't really run with that knee injury. 52 snaps played for Dawson Knox against Indy. Casey, like you said, 31st in the NFL in fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. I'll throw out Will Dissly of the LA Chargers. He's coming off a down game, still had 5 catches on 6 targets for 30 yards, dropped what should have been a touchdown on a gorgeous throw across the middle from Justin Herbert. He played more snaps on Sunday than the Chargers' other 2 tight ends, Hayden Hurst and Tucker Fisk combined. And Hayden Hurst, he missed some time earlier in the year. There was some thought that, okay, once he's healthy, maybe he eats back into that workload. He's barely seen the field the last 2 weeks. So Will Dissly does seem like the guy if you're looking for a tight end for the Chargers. He's drawn at least 5 targets in 4 of the last 5 games, and LA near the top of the NFL in terms of percentage of targets that go to the tight end position. All right, that'll do it for sneaky ads to make ahead of week 11. Let us know in the comments who you're adding, who you're dropping this week, anybody that we missed, which players we should be keeping an eye on. Again, make sure you're subscribed to the RotoWire Football YouTube channel. We got the RotoWire Fantasy channel. We got the main RotoWire channel. Subscribe to both. We'll be putting out a ton of content through the rest of the season. And of course, go check out rotowire.com/try, TRY. That'll get you free access to everything on our site.